digital sustainability. Oh, I just heard the little recording. So if you have any questions, like Haley said, please put them in the chat and we'll go over them at the end of the presentation. And hopefully you will enjoy this. And yeah, let's start. So let's talk a little bit about digital sustainability. I know that probably not many of you have heard about this term before. I personally didn't hear about this term until quite recently when I started diving more into it. And it's not a very known subject because it's still not very known and not very talked about. But that doesn't mean that it's not important. And to understand a little bit more about it, we have to understand the basics first. So I'm going to guide you a little bit through the basics of digital sustainability and then provide you with some tools and tips and some examples that you can take on after today and hopefully start implementing them in your daily lives. So electricity and digital sustainability. I personally had never realized that websites were causing a bad impact in the environment. I'm sure that many of you were just like me, because when you're plugging your laptop into a socket, you don't really get your hands dirty. There's no smell. We don't really realize that electricity can be dirty. But in fact, electricity contributes to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And about 10% of those 25% are the digital actions we have and do online. For example, this webinar, social media, online activities that we do, watching Netflix and so on. And this is something that is not very talked about. And that's why I'm going to explain to you a little bit how this whole electricity and data centers work. So I don't know if many of you know how the data centers look like, but this is kind of like it. When we learn terms like wireless, the cloud, we make it seem that this is weightless formation of storing data that is not there's not causing any bad impact. But in fact, data centers look exactly like this, and they are storing all our data 24/7. They need to collect it, process it, and it takes about, and it's connected to the internet and to the electricity all the time. And just imagine your phone. So if you're on your phone and you are constantly on your phone, and it's like a warm day, your phone does give you the warning saying your phone is too hot, you have to let it cool down. I've had that a few times. And imagine that in a data center like this. They do take a lot of energy just to power them, but also to cool them down, because they create this sauna-like environment that can take up to 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. In the beginning of COVID, global internet search increased by 40%. That was increase of video calls, streaming, Netflix, YouTube. I think maybe some of you might have noticed that pretty much around like May 2020, the resolution of some videos had to be taken down because there was just not enough power that could take on this amount of streaming all the time. So data centers are pretty much always connected, and we are responsible for it. So all these data centers are connected to each other. So it's not just one big data center like this one. There's a lot of them connected to each other. When they're connected to each other, they look like this. These are all the data centers around the world, and they're connected by undersea cables, also known as submarine cables. If we were to connect all of these to each other, it would be enough to go to the moon and back 3 times. That is just to put it into perspective, into a physical perspective, how massive the infrastructure of this is and the impact that this has. The reason why this is such a big deal and why I'm here today talking to you a little bit about digital sustainability, data centers, electricity, and so on, is because about 80% of all the data, of all the electricity globally is generated still by burning fuels, mainly coal, which is hugely polluting for the environment. Even though the ICT sector is a huge investor in the renewable energy, we are still using a lot of the fossil fuels to generate electricity to power those data centers and to power our online activities. So there are ways that we can fix it. It's just finding and knowing about how to change our activities and make them more sustainable. So here are some stats to help me put all of these into a bit of perspective. So Cisco predicts that nearly 2/3 of the global population will have internet access by 2023. That's not that far away at all. And that's about 5.3 billion internet users. That is a lot of people. And when we are sitting behind our desks, just like right now, and we're sending emails, or we probably don't think we are causing a bad impact on the environment. I certainly don't think about it all the time. But with the rapid increase of internet connected devices and internet users, the amount of data that we are transferring constantly will grow just alongside it, and will also grow the digital carbon impact with it. So it is very important that we know that it's great that everyone will have access to internet, and it's great to create equal opportunities. However, it does have a big impact in our the digital carbon footprint that we have. While one person's digital carbon footprint might be quite small, we just have to think about everyone together. Just imagine 5.3 billion internet users. All of those footprints together do add a lot. So when we talk about digital, the digital carbon impact, how big is it, and so on, that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about right now. So the digital carbon impact, it's about 3.5% of global gas emissions currently, and that is the similar share to the aviation industry before COVID. So when there were all the flights going on, that now they are coming back, but still not to the same level. So just imagine that the amount of times you listen on television about the aviation industry being such a big polluter and so on, we don't really think that the digital carbon impact is pretty much the same. So scientists predict that the digital carbon impact can be 5.5% by 2025, which would make it the fourth biggest polluter in the world if the internet was a country, just after China, the US, and India. And it could be as much as 14% by 2040, which would make it the second biggest polluter just after the US, which is insane to put these things into perspective, and especially when there are ways to fix it, and we can make that difference. One of the ways that we can try and start fixing it today, for example, is this digital declutter for businesses. One of our partners, Whole Grain Digital, came up with this, which is called the digital declutter, or the declutter toolkit. It's a very top level overview of everything that is contributing to your business's digital carbon footprint. So it takes into consideration your websites, the apps of your business, also the digital marketing. As you see, all these little bubbles here, all of those are taken into consideration, the emails you sent and so on. So it's a great way to start putting this into practice. It's just finding a little bit more about the impact that all of these different bubbles are in your company, and what you can do to change them today. So this is completely free of charge, so you can just start and go and have a look today. I will send you the presentation afterwards, so you will have access to all the links and to the stats that I'm talking about today. So don't worry, you don't have to take notes right now. I will send you all of this. Another way, another platform that is free, completely free for you to use, is the Web Foundation, the Green Web Foundation, that will help you find a green host provider for your website. This will help your website to be powered by renewable energy, by clean energy, and also will make your website faster. So it's not more expensive than the current host you're probably on. So there is a lot of people talking about how changing into a green host provider might be more costly. It's an investment they don't want to make. But just think in the long term. Right now, Google takes into consideration how fast your website is in terms of your rankings. So if you could make your website faster, you're actually going to rank better on Google. So you're actually saving money. So, and the website looks like this, the Green Web Foundation. You just type there your URL and we'll take into consideration your location. It will give you various suggestions of green host providers for you to use. This is a non-profit organization, so they're not going to try to sell you specific brands or anything. So don't worry about that. And another thing that I did myself, and I actually really like it, is that they also created this Chrome extension. So you can install it, and every single time you're browsing online, you can see if the website you're on is powered by green energy or not. So you'll have this little emoji you have here at the bottom. You will have this in the top of your page, and if you are in a green website, the smiley face will be green. If you're not, it will be in a gray and like kind of sad, which is great. I started using it just to know where I'm shopping, what I'm doing, if the websites are actually using renewable energy or not. And it's quite of a fun way to make a big difference. So you can start taking this into consideration in your activities. There are a lot of things that have a big responsibility for the digital carbon impact. One of them being digital marketing. And there's a lot of aspects that take digital marketing to be one of the biggest causers of all of these. However, I'm going to talk about two specific things that we can start changing today. One of them being our emails and the other one, our Google searches. Just teach you a little bit about these and how we can start making a change today. So let's talk about email. So OVO Energy, a renewable energy provider here in the UK, published a research about the environmental impact of emails. They calculated that the average carbon footprint of one unnecessary email, like you can see in this table here, are emails up to 4 words, is approximately 1 gram of CO2. These are some examples of unnecessary emails that we can start changing. So just before we jumped on this call, we were just discussing the fact that a lot of us send just a simple email saying thank you. Is that email necessary? Maybe not. Maybe put a footer in your email saying, hey, I'm trying to become more green. Therefore, if you don't get a simple email saying thank you, don't think I'm rude. We are discussing right now with Footprint a way to have that in our footers, so everyone in the team can start becoming a little bit more green when sending emails and just being a bit more aware of the emails that we do have to send or don't have to send, and just try and help our environment a little bit in these activities. In terms of a quote that for me was very shocking was that if, I'm going to read the quote for you because otherwise the impact is not the same. If each UK adult sends just one less email a day, it will reduce our carbon output by over 16.433 tons of a year, the equivalent of 81,000 flights to Madrid, and or taking 3.3K diesel cars off the road. So let's just put this into perspective. Let's let it sit. So if we all just send one less email per day, we can have the same impact as taking 3.3K diesel cars off the road. That is insane, right? So why are we not doing it? Because we still think that we have to be, oh, I do really need to say thank you so they know I got the email. Maybe we don't. Maybe that one email of the day will be today, and you can start it today, just after this presentation. Maybe go through your inbox and say, do I really need to respond to this email, or someone else of my team has responded it for me so I don't have to say anything? And let's just try and change the whole narrative around this of the thank you emails and the unnecessary emails, because it does have a big impact, and we can all have an impact in this and change. Here's the math in case you don't really believe in me. And I will not go through this, but I'll send it to you afterwards. So if you want to make sure that I'm saying the truth, here it is. In terms of Google searches, Google has confirmed that in terms of greenhouse emissions, one Google search is equivalent to 0.2 grams of CO2. That's the same of a drop of water. So just imagine the amount of Google searches you do per day. For this exercise, let's use 3.5 billion searches per day. That's the value that in 2019 Google said they're every day, so every single day, 3.5 billion searches on Google. We believe that now it's a little bit more. However, they have not updated these data yet. So just for the sake of this exercise, 3.5 billion searches per day. That is about 700 tons of CO2. That is the similar weight of 6 blue whales. Now just imagine 6 big blue whales just floating in the air every day with our Google searches. It's insane, right? This is one of the many reasons why Google is one of the leaders in investing in renewable energy and shouting about it and telling everyone how they want to become greener and want everyone to become greener in their activities as well. We always think, oh, does this mean I can't search things on Google anymore? No, not at all. Of course, you still need to use Google, and I'm thankful every day that we have Google to search everything. However, it is important to be aware of the impact that those searches have, and that once again, if we have the little emoji thing on the top of our Google Chrome, and then we go into websites and we know we are navigating in websites that are green, we don't feel that guilty about our searches. And actually, it's not creating a bad impact. It's just being aware of all of these. And I'm giving you the starting point to have these conversations and to start changing a little bit your daily activities online. So here's just a brief summary that I've put together of all the data that we've gone through. This is just to help you realize the impact that we do have on our daily basis. As I said, this presentation, you're going to have access to it afterwards with all the sources where I got all of this information from. But this is just so all of us can start understanding that we are responsible for this and we can change it as well. So now, to make it a bit more practical, I've already give you 3 tips if we count the emails as well. I'm going to give you some tools that you can use on your daily basis to put these things into practice. So the first one is this website carbon calculator. Just as I mentioned before, Whole Grain Digital are a partner of ours, and they've come up with this completely free of charge platform. This is a platform that is very easy to use. So you basically just copy your URL and you paste it here, and it will calculate the CO2 emissions of that particular page. So you could calculate the emissions of your homepage of your website, and just to know how good and / how bad it is. And it will take into consideration the data transfers over the wire, the energy intensity of your web data, the energy source, if it is powered by a greenhouse provider or not, the traffic that your website has, and so on. So we will take all of these into consideration. And this is how it looks. So basically, footprint, in March this year, we turned into a greenhouse provider. And just by changing that, you can see here how big the difference was. So on the left was the test we've done before having a greenhouse provider on our website. And here on the right, you can see now that our page is cleaner than 56% web pages tested. And that's very good. And actually, you can even use this to promote it on your social media. It is a great way to just share these tools and just share with everyone that you are being responsible and you want to change the way you're doing your activities online, but also you want people to come to your website and feel happy about it. Another thing that you can do with this platform is that you can install this footer, and it will tell you the website carbon emissions currently on your website. So in live, so you can put this in every single page of your website. You can just have it on your web page, and it will just be very good for people to know when they're navigating on your website the emissions that they are transmitting and so on. This is how it looks on the website. So this is in a blog, so you know, everyone can tell if you're a green website or not, which is great, because if you are, it is something you should be proud of, and you should be telling everyone that you are. So it's great. Another one, and this is something that I'm very proud of, is that a footprint. We took that concept of whole grain digital, and alongside them, but mainly our team, we put together a carbon reporting tool. So I know that in this, it's a bit hard to understand exactly what it is. We are now in the testing phase, but we are very happy to say that we have developed a tool that calculates the entire emissions of an entire website, all the emissions of the entire website. So not specifically one page, like the one I showed before, but it will calculate the emissions of your entire website, which is great, because then you can see which pages of your website are creating a lot of traffic, which ones are not, which ones are cleaner, which ones are dirtier, and the changes you can make. So for example, here in our platform, you can see that the cost savings you could have per year, if you just cut the CO2 savings you could have per year, if you just cut the page weight by 5%, 10%, or 15%. So Footprint's website is not a massive website, so the difference won't be massive. However, we did test this in Cambridge University Press's website, and just cutting 5% of the page weight was a massive difference. And we then help you and guide you on how to make these changes. In our platform, then you can also have these, I call this the bubble map, because it shows your entire website in these little bubbles. And these bubbles will say the bigger pages of your website compared to the smallest ones. So then you can exactly locate where in the page you need to make some changes. So here, for example, you see the blue bubble on the right side, which means that that page is the biggest page of the website. And then you can go into more depth and see the CO2 impact that one page has, and make changes in it by changing the size of the images, the videos, the code. Sometimes there's a lot of unnecessary code in those pages, and it's just good to understand how to change that. If I'm going to now just change a little bit here to a business example. So this is an example that I find it very interesting, and it is a quite a known brand that maybe some of you have heard of. That is the brand is called Organic Basics. So they are a Danish brand based in Copenhagen, and earlier last year, I believe, or it was this year, I don't fully remember, they launched this low impact version of their website. So at the moment, they have 2 websites where you can shop their items from. So they sell sustainable underwear and activewear, and they're very ethical and responsible brand, and they wanted to incorporate this into their digital presence. So when creating this low impact version of their website, they wanted to make sure that people knew that their shopping online wasn't causing any bad impact. So you can see there that this is their main website. You can just go to the low impact website, and this is how it looks like. So basically how it looks like, it tells you what the traffic is at the moment in the website, to the point that if the traffic is very high, they will actually not load anything on the page. And you are thinking, how does that work? So if there's a lot of people in your page, you can't shop. They still have their normal websites, but this is just so people are aware that, oh, if there's a lot of people now in the website, I'm causing a big problem in the environment by shopping at this moment. So in comparison to their actual website, to the low impact one, this one reduces the data transfer by 70%. So it's a massive difference that this website has. So it doesn't this takes into consideration the images that won't be loaded unless you request them to be loaded. There's no videos, there's no image, like high resolution images, unless it's very needed. the scripts and frameworks and the cookies and everything, take all of these into consideration to make it a way more basic website, which you can still shop from. So let me show you a little bit about, so as I was saying, if the traffic is very high, these are the difference of the levels of the website you can see. So you can see low quality photos are available. If it's very high, the website closes down, and so on. So this is how the low website looks like, the low impact website looks like. When you're shopping, you only see the images like this. So they won't load the images of the models or anything. And you're like, but how am I going to see how it looks like in a person or the color of the items? So for example, if we wanted to buy this top here on the left, we press that item and it takes you to this page. Then you can select the color you want. So for example, we wanted the brown one. And then in the top corner, if I just show here, top corner, it says tap to reveal or type to show more. When you tap that little bit, that little button, the image of the model shows up. This is because imagine you are a regular customer in the shop and you know exactly the top you like, you know your size, you know how it looks like. You don't need to see the image. So the image won't load unless you ask for it to load. For me, this is great. I find this an amazing thing that they are doing. And I went on their website to see how it would work. And it's actually very user-friendly. And it makes the whole user journey very different and very interactive as well, because you know that every single time you're pressing a button, you are creating an impact. So you know that if you are a normal customer there, you know exactly what you want. You don't have to load these images that are unnecessary. So just to overview everything that we just talked about here today, there are ways that you can find right now, just straight after these webinar, that you can start changing to greenhouse provider, see the different options that are available for you, install the Google Chrome extension of the Green Web Foundation, try and send your one less email, unnecessary email per day. Try today. I think you will find one email that you could probably save today. Be aware of your searches impact, because they do have a big impact in the world. And just check your website page's carbon emissions. If you want any support in this, please let us know at Footprint. I love having conversations about sustainability with our partners, with our clients. We always learn from each other and from experience. And at the end of the day, sustainable websites are cheaper, they are smaller, they're faster, they're more accessible, they're more user-friendly. So why not change today? As I said before, if you have a greener website, you will rank better on Google as well. And it's just great. So why not start the change today? And I hope that was helpful and that you found it useful and you can start making changes today. And yeah, please let me know if you have any tips or tricks as well that you do on your daily basis.
Thank you so much, Rita. That's absolutely some real mind-boggling and quite frightening figures in there, but that's great to bring them all together. I have put in the chat as well, we will be sharing the slides and all those links that Rita's mentioned, so you don't need to desperately scribble away. But we have got a few questions, actually quite a few. I kept thinking of my own questions, and every time I did it, someone raised the thing that I was thinking of. So we're all on the same page here. And one of the first ones was around emails and reducing sort of emails, and we've spoken to you as well. Our team are just as bad as everyone is sending unnecessary things. Are things like either Teams messages or other sort of instant message systems, do they have a lower impact than emails? Is that a nice way to perhaps move some of those things out of email inboxes?
So of course it would depend on which platform you are using and what the platform does say about those chats. So I don't have the data with me to say, oh, Teams is better than Slack or WhatsApp is better than this. But at the end of the day, of course, if you are reducing those messages overall, your impact is going to be lower, because at the end of the day, everything is connected. These are all searches, these are all data transfers. So it is, this one specifically was about emails, because Google did share exactly the impact of their one email on Gmail, for example. But I know that a lot of companies don't really want to share the impact of their platforms just yet, but with the times changing, that would be something that customers like us of those platforms can start requesting, because they want to know, like you just said, I want to know if I send a message through Slack, the impact is as big as an email. I would assume not to the same level, but of course I can't say for sure until they share with us the data of exactly sending one message or sending an email.
That's useful, thank you. And I think anything that takes an email out of someone's inbox is
exactly. It's actually good for everyone.
Who needs more emails? We had a question then about servers. You talked really early on about sort of data centers and servers and the heat and the energy that they produce and that they use. And someone had asked whether I don't know whether you will, it's quite a specific question, but whether there are any or likely to be any in the UK that run on 100% renewables. Is that something that the industry seems to be working towards?
They are working on it for sure. But from what I am aware, they are not 100% renewable, purely because, of course, they are running 24/7. So it is quite a big impact if we think about it. But as I said before, Google, for example, they are decreasing their search impact massively by changing the peak hours and changing the renewable energy throughout the day, but during the night they do use fossil fuels. But they are doing it in a way that it creates a lower impact. However, it is very hard to know which ones exactly are 100% renewable, if any. I am not aware of that per se, like exactly if there's one in the UK or not, but I can definitely look into that. And when I send the presentation, if I find it, I will send it across to you as well.
Super, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be great to know. I'm sure it's something that's been
it's actually that's a good point. I'm going to make a note of that.
And you shared that really useful tool for carbon reporting, to track your own homepage and stuff. So I was asked whether that works for apps. And actually, I wondered whether you had any more specific advice around apps, which are, a variation on a theme, but
I do not know if they work on apps. I would assume that for apps you would need a completely different platform, because this is specifically for URLs. So of course in an app it works completely different. However, I do know that our partners, the Whole Grain Digital, they do work sometimes a little bit on the app sides, but I don't think they have right now a platform that you can calculate, because that would mean you would need to calculate the entire app. And that's what we were just saying, that when you are just sharing one page, you can calculate the carbon emissions of that one page, but not the entire website. That does, when our one at Footprint, we are now developing that, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of time. It's very time consuming to run the entire website or an entire app, because an app will be everything together. But once again, if there are any, which I'm not aware, if there are, I've never, in my searches, I've never seen one. However, if I find one, I will definitely share, even if that's in a year's time, I will share.
That's great. We'll continue to add them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I'm always continuing adding things to this presentation. So it's great that these points that you're making, they are valid points. And myself, I want to find more information about this all the time. So yeah.
That's great. And you showed that fantastic example of a low impact website. I've never ever seen that before, but what a great step to get to, where you're deliberately making that impact. Other than either making images lower res or taking images out, are there other things you can do to lower the impact of your website? Or is it just about page weight, as you referred, it's sort of image size and bulk?
It is mainly about the page weight, but page weight can be put into consideration, as I mentioned before as well, the code. So we delivered a training session to one of our partners, and they are web developers, and they realized that there's a lot of unnecessary code sometimes on a page just to make it load, that it's not needed at all. You can make the code way simpler, and that has a massive impact on the weight of the page. So of course, videos and images are the easier quick fix, if that makes sense. If you just, do you really need the video auto playing, for example, or the image loading straight away? Maybe you like the low impact version website we saw, maybe you only need to load images or videos if necessary, not automatic. But code and the the script behind the web page, it does have a big impact. So if you can and you know how to fix the code and make it simpler, it's actually going to make a massive difference. And that's what our partners did after our training session. They started taking that into consideration and changing the websites they are doing for others, taking that code part into consideration in doing that, and makes a big difference. It makes the websites faster as well, which is great.
That's great. And actually there was a question about speed, and assuming, and you sort of just covered it, that making those changes to your page weight, making some of these changes will actually make, and you mentioned sort of accessibility, make your website faster,
for sure,
easier, hopefully easier for people to use. So it sort of seems like a win-win, because obviously no one wants
it is. And in terms of accessibility as well, if you want your website to be accessible from everywhere in the world, we have to be aware that we are very lucky in the fact that our Wi-Fi works very fast and so on. But actually in certain countries or certain places, very heavy websites, they don't even load at all. So if your website is faster, which means it's lower weight on the website, you will load even in those places. So you're making it more accessible for everyone. And as I mentioned before, Google changes their algorithm and what ranks better constantly. And actually, recently they changed into the fact that quicker websites, the page speed is very important to rank well on Google. So if your website might have all the SEO perfect and everything, but if it is a very slow website, you will never get to the same level as the quicker websites, because that is something they're taking into consideration. And as you said, it's a win-win-win situation. You make your website greener, make it faster, make it more accessible, you'll rank better on Google. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Like so many of the tips we've had through all these sessions on different themes, they're things that kind of make good business sense as well. Yeah. And I think it's Gemma who's put in a question, and if it is Gemma, it's absolutely, I imagine, a right thing to do, an absolute genius, is that she's on a personal note. Am I right in thinking that unsubscribing from junk emails will help too? I mean, if people didn't need more thank you emails, they certainly don't need more junk in their lives either, do they?
I am constantly in a fight with my junk email box, deleting everything and subscribing to everything, because of course that will make a difference. And it is such a easy, it's going to be so much better for us as well. The amount of junk email we get all the time, if we just cleared our inboxes from that, it would be great. So yeah, that would make a big difference, and it will be great for all of us.
Yeah, no one needs
no one needs that.
Certainly not junk ones, or certainly
exactly.
That. And a question from Jackie, I think you've sort of covered it, is a really good question. Has there been any work on identifying the carbon footprint of social media platforms, and then also platforms such as Teams and Zoom? We did touch on things like Teams.
Yeah, we just touched on that. So of course, as I said before, a lot of these platforms do not want to share the data yet on how the impact that they have. So it does make it all a bit harder to calculate those emissions. However, there are websites where you can calculate your personal digital carbon footprint. I will also add that to the list of tools and things, because I actually didn't add in this presentation, but I've done it myself. So it takes into consideration how much time you spend on video calls, on which platforms you spend on, and then it can actually take into consideration all of that, and will tell you what your digital carbon footprint is. But it is very hard to know exactly how much watching a TikTok is, or sending a meme to someone, or things like that. So as I said before, if I do find that information in the meantime, I will add to this presentation and I'll share it with you. However, Google is known for being very outspoken about this, and they do want to change it. They want to make sure that everyone that uses their platform knows what is going on. Not all platforms are the same, so they don't really want to share the impact that they have just yet.
No, I'm sure it'll come, but like you say, it might be a little while. You mentioned just then actually something that I hadn't really heard about, video calls. And again, we don't necessarily have data, but it's something that has been a massive shift away from sort of face-to-face interview. I mean, sessions like this, we never would have done a session like this a couple of years ago. No one, it would have been a completely alien concept. So is it is it safe to say that will have had some impact, but I suppose if it stopped people traveling somewhere, then it negates a bit more impact?
Yeah, of course, like you always have to find the balance between the two, right? So of course, if you are not driving as much in your a diesel car, then maybe a video call is better. However, it is this presentation specifically was looking at the digital impact of our actions and what we do online. And video calls, of course, had a massive increase in the past year due to COVID. So of course, it does ended up balancing with your carbon footprint in general. And as I said, there are platforms that calculate your digital carbon footprint, but there are other platforms that just calculate your entire carbon footprint, taking into consideration which car you have, how many times you go on a trip by car, how many times you use the train. So all of that takes into consideration, but video calls does have a big impact. However, of course, you need to find a balance between both. It's not, okay, video calls are horrible for the environment, I'm never going to do it again. Of course not. It's not like that. They are better than going back and forth all the time, 3 hours by car. So it's just finding that balance and seeing what works with the environment around us. Is just being aware that, oh, just because I'm online doesn't mean I don't have a bad impact in the world. It's not like that. It's being aware that our actions still have an impact even if they are online. So it's very important. If the energy in your house is renewable energy, then maybe your video call is not that bad, you know? So it's just finding a balance between everything around us and surrounding us and the things that we can do with the tools available to us.
That's really useful, thank you. One thing to touch upon actually was, Rita, something you mentioned to me in a conversation we had before this event when we were sort of talking through some ideas, which I've tried to be more mindful of. I'm not sure I've been great at, but certainly worth noting is about email attachments. And when you say sending fewer sort of unnecessary emails, but is there, when you were saying, if someone sends you an attachment, don't send it on, if you can save it somewhere, don't send it on to 5 people if you really don't need to. That kind of
yeah, so
things out there.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's just really reducing. So one thing that one of my colleagues once shared with me was the fact that the amount of times you hit the button reply all. I'm not saying now don't include everyone in the conversations they need to be aware of course not. But there are sometimes reply all chains that have 10 people in it. And you know that the only person in your team that really needs to know about it is probably you and one of your colleagues. Maybe don't hit the reply all button all the time, because like you just said, you're sending the attachments and you're forwarding the entire conversation to everyone. So maybe some of those people, oh, I'm going to see them tomorrow so I can let them know about it, or they don't need to be in the chain conversation in the entirety of the conversation, which is completely fine if we are doing it. And I've definitely become more aware of the reply all button. There are people that sometimes are just in the chain that I know for sure it's not relevant for them. So maybe it's just those little changes make a big difference.
So that's great. And I say, since you mentioned that, I said, like a lot of things, I'd never really thought of it, and I've tried to be a bit more mindful. It's a good tip as well. Particularly one of those where it says, you haven't attached something, did you mean to? Which usually the answer is yes, I did.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. And Lucy has pointed out in the chat, would this be, I assume so, one of the additional benefits of using something like SharePoint or another document sharing, sharing a link rather than
exactly
save the big thing and say, this is where you can find it if you need it.
Exactly, because one thing I found it that for me was a big difference. For example, if you want to share a big file that doesn't even fit on it as an attachment, I always prefer to send it as a WeTransfer, because they only download it if they really want to see it as well, which is just like the low impact website, is the fact that if you send a link, you're not actually sending the attachment per se, which will not download automatically as the person gets the email. And that on its own is going to have a big difference. So sharing links, it's always good. Sharing WeTransfer links with the documents attached to it. So only the people that really need to have access to those documents will download them. And yeah, it's just being aware of all of these little tips and tricks. And that one I didn't specifically mention here, but it's such a good one to mention, that sharing links and sharing, for example, presentation, if you're working on the same presentation, instead of sending the presentation back and forth. If you just share a link and you're both working on that presentation, it's much better. So very small changes, but very big impact that it does. So yeah.
That's great. We've got one more question. Type any more, please, everyone in the chat. We've got one saying, does the impact come from websites if you're using them, or if you just had them open? So for example, if behind this Zoom, I've got our own website and 3 others open for things I was looking at. Mm-hmm. Is that still churning through? Like, is it best
if the page is loaded, which means you had to transfer that data there. Imagine that now in the back of the Zoom call, you have a video playing constantly. Of course, that does have a bad impact. But if you, depending on the websites you have loaded, some websites only load the page as you go through. I don't know if you've noticed that. I've definitely noticed that sometimes as you scroll down, the images are loading, which means that not the entire page loaded straight away. That makes automatically a big difference. So right now it is already loaded, so you're not creating worse impact, if that makes sense, unless there are videos playing, images that haven't been downloaded for, like, for example, carousels images. That means that the image is constantly loading because it's constantly changing, and things like that. But you wouldn't need to, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're transferring the page over and over again because it is already loaded. But once again, it really depends on the websites and how the websites have their transferring the page as you go, or if they make you transfer the entire data as you just open the page.
Lovely, thank you. That's really every good idea every so often just to shut all the things on your browser. Another question from Chris. Any thoughts on the energy used by user devices versus the network and data center energy?
So sorry, can you repeat that again?
Are there any thoughts on the energy used by user devices, as in the people using them themselves, versus the network and the data center energy?
That's a good one, actually. So of course, actually one thing that I did want to mention is that, of course, that with the growth of internet users, that means more internet connected devices. So there's definitely way more devices now, and the energy. So at the moment, right now, I'm doing this presentation. My laptop is plugged into the socket to charge my laptop. However, all of them are connected to my router, right? So they're all connected to the internet. So I do think one thing that I've started noticing is if I'm not using my phone, for example, while I'm doing this presentation, I just put it on airplane mode, because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be using the internet, because even if your phone is shut, you have the Wi-Fi on, it is loading constantly because you get the notifications all the time. So if you have that in all your devices, so if you're not using them, shut the Wi-Fi off, put it in airplane mode, turn it off or not disturb or anything like that, it will make a big difference. And the data centers, of course, if your Wi-Fi is off, you're not loading the data on your phone. So yeah, I don't know if that answered, if I'm rambling a little bit much. I don't know. I think
that's a great tip there about putting it on airplane mode. I wouldn't necessarily have thought of that, but of course you're getting the weather updates and Instagram updates.
Yeah, you're constantly having the updates, which means your phone is constantly connected.
Which
so
we take
you can put in sleep mode, but yeah.
Brilliant. There's some really great questions. Thank you all so much, everyone. As I said earlier, we will share the slides, the recording of the session, and links to all those tools, hopefully later this evening, once we've managed to use some data to download and then upload the video to our YouTube. I'm just putting a link in the chat as well. We've got several more events. We're halfway through our programme. We're adding more on all the time. So we've got an event tomorrow about events, actually delivering greener and more sustainable events, workshops, festivals, things like that. Next week, we've got a piece all about travel and transport. We've got a session the week after that about green branding and how to develop and deliver green brand identities. Then in early November, we've got one about water resources and a new one added to our programme earlier this week about rewilding and open space. So if you are a business with outdoor space and you want ideas for really low cost and simple ways to, one, make it more lovely for your staff and your visitors and your customers to enjoy, but also make it a nice place for nature, then join that one as well. The web link I've shared, our event calendar is on there. Everything is free to sign up to, so join any that you don't think you can get to, but you want the recording, if you sign up, we send the recordings out to all of them after anyway. So obviously feel free to do that. We've got our new podcast on there as well, which is interviews with local business and a couple of local scientists talking about what they're doing. And really interesting one this week is from CFAS, so how they monitor the oceans around the world, all from their headquarters in Lowestoft, and feed that data into climate change scientists as well, which is really, really fascinating. So do have a listen. They're really short bits and pieces. Thank you so much, Rita, and for taking on those questions. Really, like I say, really quite frightening statistics and figures, but really interesting. Some fantastic tips I've written down. Unsubscribe from junk, which I know Gemma's got on, but that's such a good tip, and I hate junk emails. I'm going to do that. I'm going to manually do it later. And thank you, everyone. Please do ask if you've got any questions. Feel free to come back. And you'll receive
please. I've just shared my LinkedIn and my email in the chat. So if you have any further questions, or if I was not able to understand your questions exactly and you wanted to take this further, we can always just have a conversation about this. As I said, this is something I'm always learning about, and I love having conversations about it. So just send me a message on LinkedIn or an email, and we can chat a little bit more about this and learn with each other. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Rita. Nice to see you all. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Session in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.